Welcome everyone to my third edition of the 2015 NBA mock draft. You can check out my entire one round mock, in the description box down below, and then hopefully you've actually bothered to listen to the video and watch the video for my explanation on these things, because based off of the comments that I saw in the second one, where it was kind of my thoughts on what each team should do, it seemed like some of you that were commenting just looked at the description box and didn't actually listen to or watch the video, which sometimes I can't necessarily blame you, but sometimes it's important to have that context for the discussion, for the subject matter, to know why I'm doing certain things. Now, this particular mock draft, the scenario I have, is just how I'm seeing things potentially playing out right now. Not necessarily a mixture of what teams should do, but maybe more so what teams could do, and based off of certain trends and what have you, things that I could see happening, and some of them sure to surprise you. Now, I will say that in terms of this particular mock draft, that once I got to about Houston at 18, Washington at 19, I kind of rushed through just to hurry up and get it done. I am just telling you straight up and honest, because I wanted to get it done. I'll probably spend a little bit more time on thinking out those last 10 to 12 picks next week in the next mock draft, so just so you know. The next thing you'll notice that's a little bit different about this mock draft is I have a couple of trades, and when I say a couple, I mean 2 trades. I mean, there will be some trade activity happening in this draft. 2 teams that I think are very likely to explore moving either up or down in this draft could be the New York Knicks wanting to move down, and the Boston Celtics maybe looking to move up into the top 8 or top 10 of this draft from where they are right now at pick 16. So you'll see those trades being reflected, and I'll talk more about them in a moment. Now, the first thing that'll probably stand out to you is the fact that I have Jahlil Okafor going number 1 overall into Minnesota. Now, there's a part of me that says that Okafor could go number 1. There's a lot of different scenarios that could happen, but it could be a situation where the Lakers and Timberwolves would basically swap picks. Or I could see the Timberwolves saying that they believe Okafor is the superior offensive player, and the center that they already have that's making about $12 million a year that can't stay healthy, they're going to try and eventually move in a salary dump, whether it's this offseason or next offseason, and Coach Flip Saunders might really like what Okafor brings as a low post scorer, and Okafor might end up being the damn guy after all. Who the fuck knows? Now, in this case, I've got the Lakers taking Karl-Anthony Towns at number 2. I prefer him as a prospect over Okafor because I think he provides more positional versatility. It's a little bit easier to envision Okafor as a better player right now just because of the increased amount of opportunities he had in his freshman year at Duke, as opposed to Towns, who was playing in that rotation that was so deep and loaded with NBA talent at Kentucky. But I think long-term, when you're trying to project out of those 2 bigs, I personally like Towns a little bit more than I do Okafor. And in this case, even though they already have Julius Randle, last year's 7th overall pick, I don't think the Lakers would want to pass on Karl-Anthony Towns, even though they could really use a guard. And yes, for those of you that say they have Jordan Clarkson, at the end of the day, who the fuck is Jordan Clarkson? Okay, idiots. The first major surprise you'll probably see, though, is the fact that I have the Philadelphia 76ers taking Kristaps Porzingis, number 3 overall. And some of you might be saying, what the fuck? Well, frankly, a lot of times when you look at what the 76ers are doing, you have to ask yourself, what the fuck? And what the fuck they're doing. Some of you will point to the fact that they already have Nerlens Noel, they have Joel Embiid, they have Dario Saric from last year's draft, who they've stashed overseas. You might say, well, why would you bring in Porzingis? I guarantee you there are some teams that are going to view Porzingis as the guy with the most upside out of everybody in this NBA draft. Looking at a guy that's 7'1", that can move and can shoot and can handle the ball, a good athlete for his size, I guarantee you there's going to be more than one team that has this guy number 1 on the board. I assure you of that. And I will be absolutely stunned if Porzingis goes any lower than number 5 to Orlando. And in this case, with the 76ers, while you could sit there and argue they just need a point guard in the likes of a guy like a D'Angelo Russell or Emmanuel Mudiay, you could sit there and say, well, they're so bad, they just need talent anywhere. And for a lot of people, you always hear the argument that when it comes to the NBA draft, it's about best player available, not necessarily positional fit. I don't always agree with that assessment, that that's how it should be, but it is the nature of the beast a lot of times when it comes to the NBA. And when in doubt, NBA teams, rightly or wrongly, still tend to skew to the bigger side of things. And in this case, with Porzingis, he might be viewed as that rare Dirk type of talent He could be a Bargnani. He could be all of those failed European guys, but he could be one of those absolute studs too. And I could see a team like the 76ers wanting to gamble on a guy like Porzingis, saying maybe long term that a guy like Nerlens and Noel is better off coming off the bench as a six man. Maybe they feel they can line up Porzingis some at the three, or maybe they can play Saric when he comes from overseas. They can play him some at the three or bring him off of the bench. At the end of the day, they're terrible. They just need talent, period. And I could see them sitting there and going with a guy like Porzingis at number 3. I really do. In terms of the first trade that I had happen, I had the Knicks peeling back to where the Nuggets were drafting from 4 to 7. And in this case, I have the Nuggets trading both that 7th overall pick and Kenneth Faried to the Knicks. I'm not saying it's likely to happen, but I think it's a possibility that the Nuggets could be looking to totally rebuild, meaning everybody is potentially on the market, and an undersized big like Faried could be had. And a guy like Phil Jackson might like some of the defensive things and the rebounding that a Faried brings to the table, and he might want to pull the trigger. I think the Knicks are looking to peel back a little bit since they're not in the top 2 or 3 of this draft, because they still feel like they can get a contributor, potentially get a star a little bit later, and get some veteran help, something that they need. In this case, you've got the Nuggets. They need help everywhere as well, so D'Angelo Russell to me from Ohio State makes a ton of sense for them. I've got Winslow going number 5 to Orlando. They might like the thought of playing him at the 3 with Oladipo at the 2. It means they could really defend well on the perimeter, on the wings, and that could make some sense. I think Winslow is more than just a D and 3 guy, and he could end up being a franchise player for them. But you're also looking at a team that took Aaron Gordon last year, and maybe they're looking at him as more of a flex 4 type of guy, a guy that even comes off the bench. You have some uncertainty in terms of whether or not they're going to want to re-sign Tobias Harris to a long-term deal. So a guy like Winslow, the value might be too good, and they'll figure out how to work him in. You got Sacramento taking Mudiay at number 6. I think that's the floor for him. Another surprise for you might be me having Cameron Payne go number 7 to the Knicks. As time goes along, I continue to think that Cameron Payne is going to move up draft boards, and I think he'll end up in the top 10 of this draft. It's a guard-driven league, a point guard-driven league at that. You got to have one, and the Knicks most certainly could use one. So I see a guy like Payne from Murray State being a guy that could sneak into that top 10, surprise some people, and I think he would make quite a bit of sense for the Knicks. I've got Boston trading up into the top 10 to that 8th pick to get a guy like Willie Cauley-Stein. I think they need that type of impact defender down low with some of the other pieces they have in place. Just makes a lot of sense to me, and you look at it from Detroit's standpoint, I don't think Cauley-Stein works that well with Drummond down low, because if that's the case, then you might as well just keep Greg Monroe, if that makes sense. And I'm not sure if any of the other talents I saw outside of maybe Stanley Johnson makes a lot of sense for Detroit at number 8 as well. Then I've got Hezonja going number 9 from Croatia. He's playing in Barcelona right now. And then I've got Stanley Johnson going 10 to Miami. Just a really good player and a guy that I think works well and provides some flexibility in case Luol Deng ends up leaving this offseason. So you can look at the rest of this draft and let me know what you think of it, what you think could potentially happen in the next couple of weeks. Who do you think are going to be some of the biggest risers and biggest fallers? What do you think of me having Porzingis going number 3? What do you think of me having Cameron Payne going in the top 10? What do you think of me having a team like Denver trying to move up and the Knicks trading down, Boston trying to make a big move up the board? Let me know all your thoughts down below in the comments section.